You wake up on a Monday morning. Your alarm is blaring. You have a geometry textbook covered in fresh tears. Your newest paycheck reveals your net pay is inexplicably half of your gross pay, and you can't even check the weather without a pop-up ad hijacking your screen. It's easy to accept these daily miseries as natural laws of the universe, but they aren't. Every single one of these frustrations was meticulously engineered by some of the most intelligent human beings to ever live. Today, we are going to look at 6 brilliant architects of history whose incredibly noble intentions accidentally spawned the absolute most annoying parts of modern existence. Call it the irony gap. It is the massive chasm between the utopian goal of advancing human civilization and the exhausting bureaucratic reality of actually having to live inside it. Consider the massive, inescapable systems that govern our lives. Civilization requires funding. And in the 18th century, a philosopher named Adam Smith, often called the father of economics, decided we needed a fair, predictable system to pay for it. Smith laid out the core principles of modern taxation in his text, The Wealth of Nations. He argued that citizens should contribute to the state in proportion to their revenue, under clear, standardized rules. In academic theory, predictable sounds entirely reasonable. In practice, it means the modern worker knows exactly when the government is going to arrive every April to reliably slash their take-home pay, leaving them buried in an avalanche of complicated paperwork. Once we figured out how to fund the state, we had to educate the citizens. In the mid-1800s, an education reformer named Horace Mann went on a crusade to establish a standardized public school system. Standardizing knowledge is a noble pursuit. But Mann's vision materialized as professional teachers, strictly enforcing a rigid curriculum. He essentially mandated the physical constraint of sitting perfectly still at a mandatory wooden desk for 8 hours a day. The ambition was to democratize knowledge and fund the public good. The immediate consequence was trapping millions of individuals in a lifelong loop of IRS tax filings and mandatory tectonic plate dioramas. Once you are trapped inside the public school system, you have to actually clear the intellectual hurdles built into it. During a plague quarantine in the 1600s, a bored Isaac Newton supposedly took up a bear. He wanted to explain the mechanics of the universe. In doing so, he published Principia Mathematica, permanently shifting mathematics away from simple shapes and counting, and birthing the complex world of functions, derivatives, and integrals. A man trying to pass the time during a 17th century pandemic accidentally generated the very subject that guarantees millions of high school students will fail their midterms centuries later. And how do we know they failed? We can credit businessman and philanthropist Henry Fischel. He championed a concept that was highly controversial at the time. Students should have to actively prove they've absorbed the material before they are allowed to advance in life. This idea evolved into the nightmare of standardized testing, rooms packed with anxious students silently filling out bubble sheets. Look closely at the individual hunched over in the front. This is the isolated anxiety of knowing your future depends on darkening the correct circle. Newton wanted to map the stars. Fischel wanted to measure human intellect. Together, they engineered an anxiety industry. As we move out of the classroom and into the digital age, the hurdles become far more frequent. In the 1990s, a programmer named Ethan Zuckerman was trying to solve a specific problem. A major car company was terrified that their banner ad would appear right next to adult content on a web page. Zuckerman wrote code to decouple the ad from the page itself. His solution forced the advertisement to launch in its own entirely separate window. He invented the pop-up ad. Zuckerman has since publicly apologized for his creation, admitting that his good intentions unleashed an absolute monster that permanently ruined the internet browsing experience. Physical conveniences followed the exact same trajectory. John Sylvan looked at the messy, burnt pots of communal office coffee and decided to optimize the process. He invented the highly convenient single-serve K-Cup. The K-Cup exploded into a massive industry, but Sylvan refuses to even own a Keurig machine today. They are expensive to operate, and billions of these tiny, non-recyclable plastic pods are now sitting in landfills, creating a massive global environmental headache. Our relentless drive to optimize digital commerce and personal convenience produces mountains of digital and physical trash. It is a level of waste that even the original creators actively disown. If you want to clear away all of this friction, you have to imagine the alternative. Picture a world completely stripped of the engineering made possible by Newton's calculus, the public infrastructure funded by Smith's taxes, and the widespread literacy generated by man's schools. We could survive without single-serve coffee pods and intrusive web ads, but those massive foundational systems of math, economics, and education are non-negotiable for human survival. Administrative dread and intellectual struggle are simply the tax we pay for living in an advanced society. The headaches are real, but we are infinitely better off living alongside these inventions than without them. So the next time you sit down to fill out a bubble sheet or sip a cup of slightly watery pod-brewed coffee, don't get angry. Just take a deep breath and realize you are actively participating in the absolute peak of human progress.